Hi, this is
Hi,
so
Lauren.
exciting. I want to welcome everyone who's watching to Getting Personal with Compt. So, we are here to chat with workplace experts committed to building a better human experience, not just a better employee experience. That's something that is incredibly important to us here at Compt. I'll introduce myself real quick. I'm Lauren Schneider. I am the Senior PR Manager at Compt. And today I am joined by a wonderful first guest to have, Aurelie Biehler. She is the founder and CEO of Memoria. Aurelie, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Great to see you again. And thank you so much for having me. I actually spent a number of years in large corporations between tech and investment banking, so I know them pretty well. And I recently started my company Memoria, which I like to describe as the Zola for funerals. What that means is we offer a modern, tailored, and compassionate approach to cremation and farewell services for families who've just lost a loved one. Arrangements are made from the comfort of their home, supported with a suite of free tools, 24/7 advisor support, and a product and service marketplace.
Fantastic. So, you mentioned bereavement benefits. Today, we're going to be talking about doing better for our employees in that realm. Before we went live today, you and I had a couple of planning calls. We were talking all about what Memoria does, and you shared with me a really interesting statistic about loss. And I had no idea that this was the case. You mentioned that 20% of employees will face loss in 2023.
Yeah, that's right. And that statistic is pretty frightening. But yeah, about 20% of a company's workforce will experience loss this year. And that's a lot of people when you think about it. Unfortunately, no one really talks about grief and loss in the workplace. It is still very taboo. But yeah, I mean, it will touch way more employees than people expect and think.
That's interesting to me because I feel like we look at the types of policies around bereavement and the way that loss impacts each individual in a team is something that's unique for everyone. So, we have a policy that's like you have 3 days to grieve if it's someone in your immediate family, but you get 1 day if it's your aunt or uncle. And I know you and I had spoken about before, like the family dynamic is so interesting and different for every family. So who's to say that I'm not closer to my aunt or uncle than I am my brother or sister? So why should I have more or less time to grieve? It makes it difficult when HR teams are tasked with having to tell people, okay, you get a certain amount of time, but now you have to come back and get back to work. So let's talk a little bit more about how loss impacts each individual and why it's so important to support them through that unique journey.
No, I think you're right. I think that the point here is that, it's great to have a policy in place and you should, but it's also about keeping it flexible. And I think that's difficult for large organizations. They kind of want things standardized, but it's hard to put people in buckets and to your point, maybe your aunt raised you and was more of a mother figure than your mother was, and on the other hand, maybe you're not married yet but you've been with your partner for 10 years and they just don't fit the bucket of like applies for my leave, right, or my bereavement leave. So I think just I just wanted to circle on that and mention that I think people or employers should really keep an open mind when it comes to drafting their policies and thinking about who it applies to and who it doesn't. I think what's happening as well is coming back on the impact on the employee itself is numerous studies are showing that there's a huge impact on productivity at work and even in your ability to make decisions. One study I love is that actually came out a few years ago, interviewed management level on decision making post loss, and 85% of those managers said that their decision making ability was very poor. And that's pretty concerning
Mm.
if you think that those are the people who are supposed to lead your organization. And if left untreated, that can really ripple across your organization and definitely increase employee turnover. Um, so yeah, I think, definitely not a lot of support in place. And what's happening today is that, to your point, the average leave is only 3 days. And
Mm.
employees are thinking, that's going to cut it. If you think about it, you have to take care of the funeral arrangements, then you have to probably travel to the funeral itself. And that alone takes 3 days. You haven't even touched estate management yet, which is a huge piece, and you haven't even started your grieving process. And so on one side, you have employees who are expecting you to waltz in back into the office 3 days later and be fine. And on the other hand, you have employees who, are just about to start their mourning process.
The difficult thing too is remembering that everybody grieves differently. So for some people, maybe you need that time off. You need more than 3 days. You need a week, whatever it may be. Whereas other people want to throw themselves into their work and think about anything else. But it's so important to help guide them through this a healthier work-life balance and realize that they need the space to grieve in the way that works best for them. And if that means coming into work and getting a bunch of stuff done, but then having to step away for a couple of hours, then if we're supporting people in that kind of way and we're being more flexible with it, then I think we're going to see just better employees, better productivity, like you were mentioning, and a better relationship between employer and employee. I know for myself, a couple of months ago, I unfortunately had to put my cat down, and she had been with me for 7 years. So it wasn't. It was surprising that she felt so young, and I didn't want to go through this process, and it was a really hard week for me. And I remember my boss just saying to me, like, step away, take the time that you need. And they saw me online trying to work on some things. They're like, is this really okay for you right now? Do you actually need to be getting something done? Maybe you should go take a nap, go get lunch with your mom, because my mom was in town. Like, whatever you need to do in this moment. Additionally, it was like a Thursday or Friday afternoon. So it was at the point where they were like, just,
Yeah.
if you're going to take the weekend, I realize, it's funny because it's just a cat, but also it's a family member. So grief spans more than just like the human people in your household or in your family or your close friends or someone that you lose that's very important to you. But the way that they addressed it with me is something that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spoken to so many other people who have the same kind of stories, anecdotes, where something significant like this in their life happens. And depending on how their employer handles it, or even their coworkers who do something nice
Yeah.
to just support them in that time, those moments matter. So stepping up and supporting people is so significant. So if you want to do a better job of supporting your team, we're kind of touching on some of the things that you could do, but you're the expert here. So you tell me, what does that look like?
No, I think your experience is exactly right, and is a reflection of what every employer should be doing. I think, yes, apart from extending, the leave if you can, which I would recommend, because again, no one can just like grieve and sort all their emotions in just 3 days. Like, that's just not human. But apart from that, I think it's keeping it flexible. To your point, it's keeping it flexible for whoever you're lost. Even your dog, your cat, like, again, it's more about the impact they had on your life than anything else. And two, it's also about, I love what you said about everyone grieves differently. That's exactly right. Like, you're maybe the type that needed to go back into the office and get work done right away. Others physically and mentally can't do anything for days, right? And so they just need to be alone and on their own. And for others, which was actually my case, I thought I was fine. And then, like, weeks down the road, like, that's when grief hit me, right? And so I think
Right.
whatever leave you give, it would be great if employers were a bit more flexible by saying you just take those days whenever you need, whenever you think you need them, right? And so whether that's in 2 weeks or 2 months or whenever that is, but I think increasing flexibility in the policy is like a great step forward.
Sure.
I feel like we just zoomed in. I don't know if that's my laptop.
I did, yes. No, I zoomed in. I'm
Wonderful.
I'm thinking about how we can use some of this content later on because it's a conversation that we need to keep having.
Completely.
You just said, like, the 3-day policy, for example, that exists, that maybe you don't need it in that moment when that happens just to attend the funeral. Maybe you need it weeks down the road when it really hits you. And bereavement policies need to be more encompassing. That's something that we are looking at Compt this year. I know something significant for us was adding a miscarriage leave to our bereavement policy. And I think that's another aspect that if you're not living it, if you haven't experienced it, you might not think about it. So you might not realize that it's important to include within your policies.
Yeah,
So,
I 100 sorry. No,
oh,
I'm
go ahead.
saying that,
Tell me.
we've seen a lot of, companies, even in the fertility space and, mother space, or even femtech in general, just like, bringing miscarriage up more and more in 2022. And I hope it's part of conversations in 2023 as well, because I think it's incredibly important. And to your point, I think it's only if you've been through it that you properly understand the impact it has on you. But I think it's definitely something people should think about way more and have more conversations around for sure.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So, what is a practical way that employers can help? Because I realize we're talking about changing policy here, but it's not as simple as waving a wand and things
Yeah.
change. There's so much that happens within an organization. I mean, we know it from a benefits perspective right now. So many HR teams are struggling with having tighter budgets, having to work collaboratively with finance teams to ensure that what they're doing fits a budget, but also they're still attracting, retaining talent, supporting the people that they have in personalized ways and ways that are meaningful to those people. It's all really cyclical. So is there a practical way that this can be done?
I think there's definitely 2, 3 ideas that you could try and implement. I think, the first one, which isn't really tied to the policy itself, is just checking in with your employees or having some sort of process with the managers, and having some more training with them and education that once the employee is ready to come back into the workforce or, just into his day-to-day jobs or her day-to-day job, that they feel that, they're welcome there, that they're being checked in with. And again, to our point of everyone dealing with grief differently, some will need to readjust, their performance goals for that year. And some others might need to be working from home a bit more because they need to take care of their family or their mom that just, recently lost her husband, something like that. So I think it's really important to very early check in with your employees multiple times. I mean, you have to there's no point checking in 3 times with them if they said that they didn't really want to talk that week, right? So I think you need to be clever
Right.
around how you're doing it, but checking in, readjusting goals, making sure you can facilitate a better work environment for them are all things that are so important and still so few companies do. And that's really goes through training your managers and things like that. I think it's also by having more of those conversations in the workplace, colleagues notice patterns and they will be like, okay, it's actually okay for me to say something, to approach that person, to just share, my love and my condolences, whatever, right? And I think it's really by all these like positive behaviors that we can kind of take the stigma out of loss and grief in the workplace out. And so I think that's one thing to do. On even more practical level, what I love that you guys are doing at Compt is the whole like stipend idea, because again, that really aligns with my philosophy of being flexible, and that just is like helping the employee, in whatever way they might need. So on a funeral slash bereavement standpoint, that could look like, having something or, a bit of help or financial help when it comes to, finding someone to help you create those arrangements for your funeral, like an advisor. It might be helping purchase that like high level ticket item, or even just financing that great celebration of life you were envisioning. A lot of people who come to us, one example is one person had lost their dad, who's an avid golfer, and wanted to do something on a golf course, right? Like those are not exactly cheap. And then, someone else might want to do like scattering of ashes by the ocean. Like all of those things like take a minimum of logistics, I want to say. And so if you can be the employer that are helping them finance those big, moments in their lives and just really create a moment where they will remember forever, I think that's like the best thing you can do. Like what else than just being there for your employee in the most important or slash traumatic moment of their lives. So I think thinking about stipends would be a great start for sure.
It's interesting that you bring that up because back when I worked in an office, which feels like forever ago now, when big moments would happen, whether it was
Mhm.
a celebration, someone was getting married, a baby, even loss. There were so many conversations that naturally happened in the workplace where we'd go desk to desk, collect some
Mhm.
money, try to put something nice together for someone. And when we are now in this hybrid remote world, we have globally dispersed teams, but you still might be really connected with these people. I mean, depending on the relationship you have and the communication strategy within your remote organization, like you might know these people fairly well, even though you're not desk mates. So being able to do the same kind of thing and offer financial support, whatever that may look like, if it's like a spot bonus or the employer says, for each person, we're going to offer an annual bereavement stipend. And if you use it, okay. And if you don't use it, okay. And that goes towards all of the things that you mentioned. The flexibility of it is fantastic, where you can use it for anything and you're not pigeonholed into, well, it only goes toward funeral costs or it only
Yeah.
goes toward, mental health
Mhm.
or counseling. Because as we've been talking about this whole time, people respond to things in different ways. So maybe I do need to go see a therapist because of this, and they don't accept my insurance. So this goes beyond the traditional healthcare that we're offering people. And now I have a bucket of money that I can use to get the help that I need. A lot of times, people in this scenario have people stop by with food,
Yeah.
knocking on their doors with a casserole or something.
Yeah.
Sustaining your health and wellness during this time is so important. So even if it's sending someone on your team like $20 to DoorDash a meal,
Mhm.
little moments like that matter. It's it's the tiny, consistent support, the show of support that I think goes the longest way, especially when we talk about bereavement, but beyond that, in the workplace as a whole, and in creating a more human experience at work. So, before we go, since we have a few minutes, I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit more about your platform, how people can use it, how employers can enable their teams to use it, maybe to go beyond traditional employee assistance programs,
Mhm.
and get the real supportive help that they need.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say, like, I'm incredibly thankful that we were able to have this conversation. I think it's so important, and I think there's so much celebration in some ways, in the workspace when it comes to a wedding, a birthday, and we can make loss not this like horrible thing that like people are trying to
Mhm.
avoid by all costs. We can really try. It's part of you. It's part of humanity, and should be part of the workplace. So I just wanted to say that I'm glad that we were able to talk about some of those things. So
Me too.
Memoria, so we do help employees kind of first have an understanding of okay, assessment kind of like where they are and where we can jump in to kind of help them craft something that's again suited to their employees. A large corporation will have different needs than a small one. Someone in like who has a lot of remote workers versus a lot of people who are like in person, like a lot of that kind of changes what's best for your organization. So we do kind of like counseling and put those policies in place on a more practical basis when it comes to employees. So whoever comes to us really has the ability to plan everything from the comfort of their home. And I think that's important because
Mm,
there's no like, hey, like fly. Imagine your parents are in Florida and one, has to passes, unfortunately. You have to fly there.
right.
You have to go to the funeral home in person there, and things like that. So like there's none of that with Memoria. It's really from the comfort of wherever you feel best, and not taking time off work or from your family, even if you need to take care of them. So I think that's a big thing, and we do help. Again, as I said, really more of the direct cremation approach to any farewell services that you might need. We also have a bunch of tools in place to kind of like streamline that whole process just with technology, so you know where you stand along the way. And so those are really the things we focus on. And we have our great marketplace where originally started off just to have families pick out what they wanted for the funeral, but we have more and more people coming to gift actually, and be like,
Hmm.
my friend lost their dad. I wanted, to your point, I want to do a small gesture. And so they come to our marketplace and they find, like remembrance and gifting options that they can send over. So I always like talking to those people too, because, their stories of how they're feeling, about a friend passing or things like that. And I think that illustrates like all of those people have jobs, all of them are, in the workforce. And, it's just like a confirmation every day that like it's literally grief is and losses is everywhere.
So, if someone wants to reach out to you, learn more about Memoria, ask you some questions, how they can use your platform, or just network because this is a great opportunity for that, how can they reach you?
Yeah, so feel free. LinkedIn is always a great way. So you have my name, Aurelie Biehler, there. So feel free to add me. Again, ask me any questions. Where I love these conversations, so I'm always very open, even if it's just a network. And in terms of our website, please go to www.memoria.co. And if you need help right away, you can always contact us at support@memoria.co. And yeah, we have, again, 24/7 support. So we should get back to you pretty quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today, Orly. I really appreciate it. This is such an important conversation to have, and I'm sure will not be our last.
I'm hoping it won't for sure. And hopefully that can, provoke some thoughts, for whoever is watching. And again, I think reach out to Lauren or I if you have any questions. Always here for you. So thank you so much, Lauren, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone who is watching. If you have any questions about personalized benefits, you can reach out to us at compt.io. You can send us a message on any of our social platforms. We also are always here to help. Thanks.